So welcome to what I think is the last installment in my review of the Citroen C5 X7. In this fourth part we're going to talk about ownership. Now in the previous videos I told you about the history of the car. I've told you how spacious it is inside, how nice it is to look at, what it's like to drive. But you can probably find that out for yourself if you were to go, for example, to a second-hand car dealer and try one out if the C5 was available in your market. But what's harder to find out is what this car is actually like to own, what it's like to live with every day, hence this video. Now I'm going to start off with the costs because that's the thing I get asked a lot in forums. And it's probably the silliest thing to talk about because costs are fickle. Currencies are subject to the never-ending march of inflation. Car values can plummet overnight. In 10 years, all of these costs are going to be meaningless because the market's moved on tremendously. And of course, it all depends on the market you are in. For example, the market that I am in this market, second-hand car values are hyperinflated, which neatly brings me on to how much this car cost. I paid in January 2019 for this June 2008 Citroen C5 X7 Tourer with a 1.6 litre HDI diesel engine with 110 horsepower, 250,000 kilometers on the clock, and a partial service history. I paid 7,000 euros, and I had to haggle. Now, many of you in wealthier countries are probably reeling from that value, 7,000 euros. It sounds very expensive, but for this country, it was actually rather a good deal. That's just the market I'm in. There's nothing I can do. Now, the other two main costs, which are probably the most significant, is servicing and maintenance. Now, servicing I consider things that have to be changed every now and then. So that's oil, filters, tyres, etc. And I paid in total, as near as it makes no difference, 1,300 euros. Over 45,000 kilometers. And as I mentioned, January 2019, I'm now in August 2021. So that's 2 years and 8 months. And I've serviced the car twice over that period. Once every 20,000 kilometers, which is about 12,500 miles. And I paid for those services 280 euros each. One of them done in a Citroen Specialist. Not that that's relevant, but yeah, I just thought I'd chuck it in there. Another big expense were the tyres, 487 for all four, and included alignment. They're Uniroyals. They're supposed to be Michelin, I know, but I think Uniroyals are like the off-brand of Michelin. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but someone's going to tell me in the comments below. And then you've got other odds and ends that add up. For example, I don't know, windscreen wipers and other such things. The other big cost, maintenance. Now, maintenance I consider all things that have to be fixed, that are not on a schedule. So there's a cow in the road. Hello, cow. Sorry, back to the review. The most significant cost were the front suspension arms. When I got the car for a while, every time I'd go over rough surfaces, there'd be a racket. But when I'd brake, it would stop. And it was very difficult to diagnose. Only when I took it to a Citroen Specialist was it properly diagnosed. So he swapped the suspension arms and some other bits and bobs, and the total was 575 euros. Then another significant cost was the battery. That was something like 146. An O-ring, a rubber O-ring that lived in the middle of the engine, that had failed and coolant was leaking out. That was 150 euros. And that was mostly labour. There was a vacuum pump that failed. That was the princely sum of 38 euros. And then some other preventive maintenance. There was the diesel particulate filter, 250 euros. And also some paint work done, which was about 200 euros. That was to make sure the car didn't rust or look like crap or degrade over time. And then there are lots of bits and bobs, I don't know, like bulbs and also the door hinges. I had to swap them over, and I think it was about 40 euros a pop. There's a video on that. And so all that adds up to a total of just over 1,500 euros for maintenance costs. Then you've got other assorted costs that also add up. And I'm completely fine with all of these costs, to be very honest, because the car has been rather reliable. It hasn't left me on the side of the road crying. And because in comparison to my previous cars, this is turning out to be a bargain. I had a Volvo S60 before, and that car, that really ate up the cash if anything went wrong, because Volvo here where I live, they don't stock any parts locally. They have to bring it in from Spain. It becomes very, very expensive to fix one of them. Just for example, the switch for one of the doors, the passenger door, that cost me 600 euros. Then I had a Mazda 6, and that car was just a nightmare. That car was a piece of excrement. I didn't like it at all, and also I spent wads of cash fixing it, and I still cry every night into my pillow regretting all the money I spent on it. But I digress. And the other big cost is, of course, fuel. But talking about that cost in actual terms of money, that's absolutely meaningless, because oil prices fluctuate more than, you know, a pregnant woman's mood. Sorry, pregnant women. What isn't meaningless is that this car has done an average of 6.32 litres over those 45,000 kilometres in 2 years and 8 months, which is this amount of MPG UK. And that's really good for a big heavy car like this, especially considering since I've done most of that in town on the school run, going to the supermarket, etc. Because I don't get out onto the open road as much as I like, not even close. Out on the open road, this actually does very good averages, which I can attest to because I keep meticulous records, and also because I keep taking photographs of the trip computer. And finally, I'm going to touch on build quality. Now, I'm no stranger to Citroens because, well, my father was a massive Citroen fan, and I caught the bug as well. He had, as far as I can remember, because he probably had more before I was born, an AMI8, 11 CXs, some of them were parts cars, mind you, 2 Visas and 2 BXs. My very first car was a Citroen BX that actually belonged to my father, so I'm no stranger to Citroen build quality. And this car, this Citroen C5, is very un-Citroen-esque, very much so. The first time I ever got into this car to test drive it, I was completely taken aback at how tight and new it felt. It was 10 years old when I first drove it, and everything felt and still feels very well put together. And even today there are no squeaks, no rattles, nothing seems to be falling apart, as is usually the case in French cars. Listen. Sometimes over rough surfaces the load cover can rattle a bit, but it's nothing to write home about, to be very honest with you. This is the best built Citroen I've ever sat in. And of course all of you are going, oh my god, no, it's a French car, how's this possible? I don't know. When Citroen launched the car, as I've touched on in every single video, they tried to market it as German, and I believe a lot of that was into the effort they put into the build quality of this car, into how well this interior, for example, is made. And yeah, if there's anything you can say about German cars, as much as their general reputation for reliability these days is a bit overblown, they do make very nice interiors that do feel very well screwed together, and this in that respect feels rather German, to be very honest with you. Now all of this is moot, all of this is very debatable, because it all depends on the car you have. I think this car actually was well treated in its previous life. I think it was probably more of a motorway car than a town car, which contributes immensely to a car's longevity. If you get another Citroen C5 X7 that's been treated very poorly, that its owner has thrashed and missed services and that sort of thing, then you're probably not going to have the marvellous ownership experience that I do. I was about to wrap up the video. In fact, it's all edited and ready to go on the laptop. But I remembered that ownership isn't just reliability and what it costs. It's much more than that. It's all the little things, all the foibles, all the perks. In fact, I think that a car, obviously there's the general car itself, how comfortable it is, what its engine's like, but it's the little details that can sometimes make or break a car. For example, my old Mazda 6 that I previously showed in this video, that had so many little details that got on my nerves that it basically made the car, as near as making a difference, undrivable. And this car also has its little quirks and such, and I want to show you a couple of them. One of them, for example, the key position, it's only got two, either on, like it is now, when you turn the car on, or off. There's no like intermediate position that allows you to just turn on certain instruments. That's a bit weird. I don't like that. But again, none of this I'm going to say is a deal breaker, because otherwise I wouldn't own the car. Another thing, when you get in or out, sometimes you can hit your head on the frame. And I'm not the only one to complain about that. It also happens in the back. But I believe this plays into the refinement of the car. Why is that? Because then the inner frame and the outer frame overlap, and that provides a better seal from the outside elements. So that, I think, helps the refinement. So I'd rather have that and hit my head every now and then than not. Then here's another one. Sorry, I know some people are offended by these, but if you are, piss off. Sometimes when driving along, sometimes it's easy to mix up the temperature dial with the volume dial. That's happened before because you're not looking, you're just feelings, tactile feedback. My significant other has actually once put the temperature on full furnace mode instead of turning up the volume. That was funny. I would also rather there was a dial instead of buttons for the fan control, but you can't have everything. With the ashtray and 12-volt socket door open, it's actually a rather nice place to just perch your phone, and it will not jostle around while you're driving. And that also means, because it's so close to the 12-volt socket, you can charge it while it sits there. That's good. This little shelf here hides the Obd2 Port. I find it to be a good little shelf for my garage remote. I added this bit onto the end so it wouldn't flop about, but that's actually really cool because it's rubber. It also stays in place. Another thing I like with this being a family car is that the rear of these seats is sheathed in this plastic, and that means if you've got small children like I do, and of course they will kick the seat in front or just generally put their feet up against it, and it's going to be muddy and dusty, and it's just easier to clean, and also offers better protection than fabric or leather. Unfortunately, over time they will come off. These are loose. The headrests, you can push them up like that or put them flat, and they work rather well. Very comfortable. Of course, comfort is what this car is all about. Another thing I'm not so keen on though, the seats can only be folded down from this switch here. You can't do it from the back, but that makes sense because these are tumble seats, which means this lower part folds forward against the back of that seat, and then you fold down the rest. So that's probably forces the user, the driver, to actually come here, put those seats down before they fold the rest down. There are lots of tether points, which are very, very handy. You can put netting up and all that sort of stuff. You can see that in the back. Those are all tether points. Very useful. Oh God, it's a furnace in here, so I'm going to wrap this up. That's all I can think of for now. Now, C5 owners, I bet there are many of you watching this. Chime in. Tell us what your experience is like. Hopefully it's as wonderful as mine. If not, then tell us what it is about the C5 that you do not enjoy. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in a future video. Like, subscribe, share, etc, etc, etc. And I bid you farewell. And I'm getting out because it's just so blooming hot.